Bully your flatmate? I'll ruin your fun. I work in student halls of residence for a smallish campus-based university in the UK. This involves malicious compliance after a group of students had been bullying one of their flatmates. I'll call her Sarah, and happened within the last 10 years. Sarah was neurodivergent and had plenty of interests. None of these interests involved going out partying. She preferred to live in a quieter, cleaner environment. The other four all had similar interests to each other. Very typical first year in halls stuff. There were kitchen parties after clubbing at 3 a.m. Alleged drug use. Post-party leaving strangers passed out on kitchen floor. Empty bottles everywhere. And piles on rubbish, washing up. Generally messy. Normally, a student would report this. We give out contact details that can be used for anonymous reporting. Or we'd offer flat meetings to help them find compromise. E.g. agreeing to limit parties to X times a week. Checking with each other before planning one in case someone has a big deadline and needs quiet on a specific night. Cleaning rotas etc. And the cleaners could issue fines if it was a mess on weekly cleaning day. But Sarah was terrified of reporting anything and found interacting with staff very difficult. We only knew there was an issue because she would tell her mom. And her mom would tell us. We'd offered a swap, but she told her mom that she didn't want to move as it would disrupt her routine and it wasn't fair for her to be punished when she'd followed the rules. So we were working with her and her mom to try and get her to the point where she could formally report it, referring her to well-being services, and doing random flat checks at night to see if we could catch the students using drugs. And had the cleaners on the lookout for evidence as well. This carried on until term 2, and by then the four had clearly decided they just didn't like her and thought she was weird. The inconsiderate behavior had escalated to bullying. She'd recorded them calling her some horrible names and played it back to us. But again refused to send us the recording and wouldn't formally report it. I appreciate she wasn't helping herself. But I don't think she was being deliberately difficult. She just really struggled with certain things. Her flatmates had definitely figured out what pushed her buttons. We were trying to mediate. Flat meetings. Trying to enable her to feel safe in reporting their behavior formally etc. But it was obvious to staff that they wanted to push her to move out, and they had a friend who was always hanging out in their kitchen who clearly wanted to move in. One day she must have snapped and she threw a glass across the room, causing it to smash on a wall. It didn't hit anyone, but they jumped on this and all their parents were on the phone about how their daughters were living with someone dangerous. At this point we have no evidence of their bullying or breaches of their tenancy. But they have evidence against her and had all en masse filed reports. We have no choice but to move her. Here comes the malicious compliance. Not even before we'd sent cleaners into her old room we start getting requests for the friend to move in. Apparently a supportive person would help with the trauma, and someone else in the room would give them closure. The idea of them getting their way in this manner infuriated me. Instead we asked one of our older and more experienced resident advisors, a final year student, if they could move in. This is someone they would not be able to bully and had a good idea about what had been really going on in that flat. It was a nice flat in a very new building. Said it was a bit of a perk for them as well. The best bit was the parents ringing to complain about how we'd moved a stranger in and how upset their daughters were. When I explained we'd put a very experienced resident advisor in there who had training in peer support, all their arguments collapsed. The requirements: supportive person and room relet for closure? Tick and tick. Sorry. No more kitchen drug parties for your daughters this year. Sarah didn't have any further action taken against her for the glass throwing. She did actually get some additional well-being involvement, and it was deemed that the move was penalty enough. and incident unlikely to reoccur. She loved her new flat. It was a single occupancy studio in a really nice building, and we kept her on lower rent. Her mom said the studio was perfect as she could control the mess and no one moved her stuff. She felt safe. She actually rebooked a studio for the following year and did go to finish her degree. I have no idea what happened to the other students. I hope they look back and reflect on what they did. But sadly part of me doubts it. At any rate, given we'd ruined their party venue, I hope they managed to get some studying done. I had two really awful roommates at two different universities. My first awful roommate moved in right after Thanksgiving, after I had the room to myself for months because my original roommate had gotten a single. She was a partier and I was neck deep in depression, so I wasn't doing anything. She came back one night and the other girls with her woke me up to show her that they had not in fact left me at the bar. My second dorm was a triple that I moved into a week or two after the semester had started. My roommates already weren't excited. I was also 4 years older than them and worked 20 hours on top of being a full-time student. Wasn't a huge issue, so I wasn't in the room much. One of the worst things she would do was sit on the floor, naked, and queef because she could on demand. I found out when the other roommate wanted her out that she'd do drugs on my desk when I would go home for the weekend. She eventually died on her 21st birthday because she was driving under the influence and ran into the back of a parked semi. Well played. I am so glad it worked out for Sarah in the end. That must have been a nightmare. Beautiful. Great job for taking care of that woman and trying to help her as much as you can. Really appreciate it as someone who is neurodiverse himself. I am happy you tried to look out for her. It may have been worse, but knowing she had some support probably helped her, I hope. Sorry, Sarah had to put up with bullying and abuse to the breaking point, but really happy that staff was looking out for people that don't have or won't use their voice. Good for all of you and happy ending for her. I commuted to school, so I never had roommates. I did have a friend of mine get woken up in the middle of the night by the local SWAT team raiding one of his roommates. Seems he was building a bomb and it was under the bed. Other kids were hoping for Kinglog. And got King Stork winking face. Sarah was neurodiverse. A person cannot be diverse. Diversity is a relative measure of a population. Homegirl is neurodivergent. A room that has her and a neurotypical person would be more neurodiverse than a room with two neurotypical folks, or one with two neurodivergent folks. I'm sure you did not intend this, but when you refer to someone as diverse, it's got this like vague weird othering vibe to it. Least it does to my ear. He's one of our diverse students. You hear it? Coulda avoided all of this by just working with her to be moved to a better environment to begin with, instead of waiting for things to get to such a terrible place for everyone. That isn't punishing someone for following the rules. I would have worked with her to reframe that thinking as it caused her to dig into a far more punishing environment for no reason until her mental health deteriorated to the point of lashing out and bringing trouble onto herself. Especially by your own account that at that point the only issue was other college students being normal college students. Though passively aggressively working to push her out is not an okay thing to do. It really is not much different than having to deal with random spot checks and similar passive aggressive abuse that wouldn't otherwise exist for any other college student. It seems like you saw this problem coming a mile away, and instead of working with the students to come to a very clear and easy mutual solution, you allowed all of them to become toxic to each other and themselves. then picked sides to further punish students out of a misplaced sense of vindication. A simple, "Sarah, you're following the rules." But they are also just living their lives. Don't punish yourself by remaining in a living environment that doesn't suit you or them. Let me work to find you a place you will be able to be you and be happy without issue. Could have made everyone happy well before anyone started acting out. Good on you. Perfect MC. Yeah, it did. Life's crazy lol. So you knew there was a major issue but refused to take action because the student wouldn't file a formal report? Talk about enabling the bullies. What's wrong with you?
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.